Hello, everyone, and good evening. I hope you're having a wonderful Thursday evening. Thank you for tuning in. This is Froggy Talkin Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name is Ryan Peters, joined with the one and only Joe Spillman, coming off a couple Super Bowl wins. Champ, coach, and now fully shaved.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm fully shaved. My beard's gone. My head hair's gone.
Just in time for winter.
Just in time for winter. I told those young men, the 5th and 6th grade football team this year, that if they happened to win a championship, that they could shave my beard off. And, you know, they went out and put out the hard work, and today they got rewarded by being able to take the clippers to my face.
Did you? And then you had a football game, correct?
Well, we had a football game before.
Football game before. So
yeah.
Anybody get hurt?
No.
I mean, I'm really concerned for the parents, actually.
Yeah, we had a parent versus player football game. Actually, the parents took it away 20-6. I'll tell you, we pretty much dominated. But
that's good.
You know, that was probably known going into it. I mean, we put in a couple practices and
a lot of film.
Yeah, and we really had our guys out there on the field putting in the work, and you know, those 5th and 6th graders just couldn't keep up with us.
Well, you know, they got some hardware and everything, and, you know, at times you got to put kids in their place.
Well, you do, and actually, you know, since they lost us, I actually awarded the Super Bowl trophy to the parents instead of the players tonight.
That's good. That's good. Take that, kids. Congratulations on your 2 Super Bowls. Hope you enjoyed it for the 4 days. But we're actually going to talk about a championship ourselves, Joe, going into the final week of the NASCAR season, and what could possibly be one of the greatest, if not the greatest move we've ever seen in our entire lives. This past weekend, the thing that took second was the person who actually won the race, who had to win the race. Christopher Bell, he punches his ticket on the final elimination race in back-to-back rounds. So the final 4 stands Joey Logano, Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott, and then the man who in one turn completely changed his perspective, possibly in NASCAR forever, Ross Chastain. So I'm going to lead it off with that. Number one, how did you enjoy the race? And then we'll get into the most entertaining, controversial part at the end.
So I did enjoy Martinsville this time around. You know, as you remember earlier in the season, the first visit to Martinsville was somewhat boring.
Not somewhat.
Yeah, it was boring.
Was
the only thing anybody was talking about was a hot dog that they ran out of because nobody wanted to watch the race, so everybody stood in line for hot dogs. But, you know, this past weekend, I thought that was a good race. It started off boring. I mean, you know, the last 20 laps were incredible, but that's pretty typical of every NASCAR race, I think. And, you know, that is what it is at Martinsville. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you kind of want to look at it, with the new cars, they take a lot more banging. So there's a lot more banging that goes unnoticed at Martinsville, and that leads, I think, to a little bit more boring race on that short, flat track. So, but the end of that race was incredible. I've never in my life witnessed something like that as long as I've been watching NASCAR. Well, I guess we have witnessed something like that. We saw a driver try to do that a couple years back, and
we've seen attempts.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out, but. If you're listening, you don't pay attention to NASCAR or thinking, what are Ryan and Joe talking about? So on the last turn, coming out of turn 3 into turn 4 at Martinsville, Ross Chastain had to pick up 2 positions to advance to the championship race this weekend. And there was, you know, it's very hard to pass at Martinsville, and you really can't pass high because you run into the wall. So he just decided to slam his car into the turn and slingshot himself around everybody at the expense of his car. He just hit the gas and let the wall take him for a ride. And he was able to gain those 2 positions and beat Denny Hamlin by, I think, 1 point or 2 points.
He actually ended up beating him by 4. He passed 6 people on that.
It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. And we've talked about Ross Chastain not only on a NASCAR show that we do or did, and also on this show, and he's had his ups and downs this season. But I mean, you got to hand it to the guy. He saw something. I think, what did he say? I tried to video game it.
Yeah, he said I played a lot of NASCAR 2005, and you know, he sent it literally. I mean, he sent it, and to kind of set this up, he beat like his rival. Like he and Denny Hamlin have had run-ins the entire year. And a lot of what Ross Chastain has done, and this is a 29-year-old driver. He's had his ups and downs. He's been known as the Watermelon Man. And typically when you're known for what your family does, you're not known for what you're doing on the racetrack. You know, he mentioned he was at Spire Motorsports, and it was a big deal if they had sticker tires, and that was only 2 years ago. And he's had a lot of growing. As a 29-year-old race car driver in the Cup Series, he's still pretty green for what he's been able to accomplish. But you're right. I mean, we've seen a meteoric rise out of a team completely out of nowhere. Literally built almost in the night 2 years ago at Trackhouse Motorsports. Took over a very average Chip Ganassi Racing, a place that many thought Kyle Larson was being held back from, was Chip Ganassi Racing. But what Justin Marks and them have done, it just kind of alludes to just how exactly this happened. I mean, Ross Chastain and Trackhouse Racing came out of nowhere. When nobody talked about Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain before this year, and now you're talking about a driver who's had his run-ins, who's done different things. He's hit people. He's apologized. Heck, he sounded like he was about to cry one time whenever he's like, I just got to get better. And if people want to take me out of this car, he goes, I understand. And I was like, well, I have a little bit of a backbone. Just, apologize and move on. But, I mean, he obviously takes this serious. And I think that's because of what he's been through as a driver. And then just completely out of nowhere, out of absolute nowhere, after being told he needs to gain 2 positions at Martinsville, a place where you barely get to the tack on 4th gear, he puts it in 5th and just hits it as hard as he can, uses centripetal force to slingshot all the way around the track. And not only does he gain the positions, he gains extra 4 more, gets himself in, sets a new track record.
Yeah.
He was going 70 mile an hour faster than anybody else on the track at that time. And now might be the best performer in the Final Four to have a chance to win a championship Sunday.
Yeah, and I'm a Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson fan. That's no secret, but I think I'm pulling for Ross Chastain come Sunday. I mean, watching what he pulled off and what he did, and just really it's kind of really to understand this, and if you're really into NASCAR, maybe you do or maybe you don't, and maybe I'm embellishing it in my own mind, but for him to do that and then finish 1 spot ahead of Denny Hamlin, who he has had just a war on the track with. You remember the race where they played cat and mouse all race.
Well, even in this race, they had a great battle.
Right. And it's kind of one of those fairy tale things that everybody wants to see in sports. And a lot of people were pretty hard on Ross Chastain this year. But I'll tell you what it looks like the fandom out of NASCAR this week is 100% support for that young man.
It literally is, like coaching has always been said, no matter what you do, and we'll talk about that later. It's what have you done for me lately?
Right.
And I've never seen it out of a NASCAR driver. I mean, this weekend had the most polar, united responses, one of hate and one of unity. Everybody came out of Martinsville going, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And now it's almost like giving Ross Chastain a hall pass for trying something that everybody has thought about but has never successfully executed. And at the same time, the Saturday race, everybody now hates Ty Gibbs.
Well,
I mean, the same track, a track that's hard to pass at, you have one guy in Ty Gibbs who's done a lot of winning, wrecks his teammate when he doesn't have to because he's already in the next round, gets booed. The crowd screams, "Thank you, Grandpa."
And then double down in the interviews.
Calls himself Jesus, compares himself to Jesus. And then the guy that's wrecked people all year doesn't touch anybody and passes 6 people at 70 mile an hour faster. I mean, it was the craziest. You mentioned it was a boring race, the first and second stages. And then the third stage happened, which is legitimately half the race, and everything just changed. Like, that it seemed like that anxiety, that anticipation set in, and I think, a lot of people started grabbing that steering wheel a little bit tighter. But I just have never seen anything like that in my entire life with sport. I don't know how, like, is there a way a football player, a baseball player could be universally loved in one day?
Not at that level. So I think what you saw or what you witnessed this week is the equivalent of Babe Ruth calling his shot in NASCAR. I mean, that's the only thing that you can really compare it to, because
except we know this actually happened.
Yeah. Except we know this actually happened. We witnessed it. We saw it. There's video evidence.
Yeah.
And for a baseball player to call his shot, which you could believe this if you want. I actually watched my dad do that one time. Whole nother story. But it was just to me, so
right.
he just told me he was going to hit a home run.
Right.
But for him to just basically put it all on himself and say, you know what, I'm going to risk my car, I'm going to risk myself. I mean, you're still going over 100 miles an hour in a vehicle, and I'm going to get this done for my team, was just absolutely incredible. One thing, though, that I will point out or say, I found it kind of interesting that the only driver that we've ever seen really attempt this before, which was 5 or 6 years ago at Darlington.
No, it was it was last year.
It was last
year or 2 years ago.
He was still in the 42 car.
Okay, so then it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Then.
Okay, so it's been a couple years back. So you remember Kyle Larson tried to do this at Darlington.
Absolutely.
And just totally tore up his car. Didn't work out for whatever reason. I think maybe we talked about this, and I think maybe you said because the track was a little too banked at Darlington for him to pull it off. But for him to give an interview after the race and say, yeah, I don't think this is a good look for our sport.
This is a black eye.
Yeah,
it's a degradation to what we see in competition. And I'm like, you literally try to do verbatim
the exact same thing.
The difference was your car looked like it peeled back like a sardine can when you tried it, because you tried it with the Gen 6 car. These composite bodies was able to take care of it, but you're right. There could not have been a more hypocritical thing. It was almost like watching a politician. Yeah, I don't believe in fracking. Well, we got this right here. For the last 20 years says that you do. Okay.
So Kyle Larson's my guy, because as you know, I'm a huge dirt track fan. I love to watch racing on dirt, and that's where Kyle Larson's from, and he's an incredible dirt racer. I mean, just hands down. But and he is my favorite driver in the sport. But even I'm watching this, and normally you give your favorite driver a pass on things like that, and even I'm like, come on, Kyle, are you serious? You're trying to take away what this guy just did, and it's amazing.
I think everybody that didn't like it was upset. Now, here's what blew my mind, Joe. I'm on Twitter, and I'm not going to give you my Twitter handle so you blow me up. But I'm on Twitter. I saw 4 Formula One drivers go, this is the greatest thing in motorsports all year. And they're not allowed to touch each other.
That's saying a lot, too.
I was out. I saw Pierre Gasly. I saw Fernando Alonso, a champion. And I saw, I think it was Mick Schumacher. And then I don't think it was Bottas. It was somebody else. I believe it was 4. It might have been a Formula 2 driver was the last one. But I know Pierre Gasly and Fernando Alonso, because that's what astounded me, was them reaching out and go, this is the pinnacle move in motorsports this year.
It was incredible.
And I think they inside go, we would have done that in a heartbeat to win a Formula One race. Right. Because in their sport, not only is that's impossible. I mean, you can't hit anything in their sport. But it's almost impossible to win due to the money differences and things like that. I mean, Max Verstappen's won like 80% of the races this year. So for them to go, wow, somebody actually got to fully send it and got to capitalize and now gets to race for a championship, I think that just blew people's minds.
Yeah, and Bubba, that is the definition of I don't lift.
That is the definition, yes. That's not even, he didn't even lift off the throttle. The throttle was all the way down, let alone lift the brake or anything else. But I want to transfer this into the last few minutes here that we have on this topic, the Final Four. Okay, you got Joey, Ross, Christopher, and Chase. I'm guessing you're going to go with Chase, but tell me who you're going with and why.
No, I'm going to go with Ross Chastain. I think he's carrying the momentum. I think actually I might have gained a new favorite driver this week. I mean, all the problems he's had, as of right now, I'm pulling for him. But I want to bring up something.
Okay, go ahead.
How incredible is it that we're sitting here doing a radio show and we're talking about the 6th place finisher when Christopher Bell twice, that's how incredible this is. Twice in these playoffs was on the cusp of elimination and wins his way into the next round.
He's the only driver to do this twice, to make it in to the next round by winning the last race when they had to. Other drivers have won, and it didn't look like it was pretty bleak, but they're still mathematically able to get in. Christopher Bell's done this twice, matching Kevin Harvick.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Kevin Harvick's a seasoned vet. He's a champion. If I'm going to pick a driver, it's actually Christopher Bell, and that pains me because I can't. After everything I've seen with JGR, I'm fully out moving forward, but I'm a huge Christopher Bell fan. When he came in, I think he races the right way, in my opinion. He's a clean racer. I think he's done nothing but get better with possibly 3rd or 4th place equipment. Maybe not this year.
Right.
But more importantly to me, not only, I think it shows how great of a crew chief Adam Stevens is. Adam Stevens has made 2 calls to get Christopher Bell into victory lane, to get to the Final Four. And, I know he had a rocky relationship with Kyle at the end, and I think maybe their time came spent. But at the end of the day, a 2-time NASCAR champion, Kyle Busch, probably looks back and goes, wow, I really messed that up. Because I had Adam Stevens, and I let that relationship deteriorate. And now he's gone and given Christopher Bell, I don't know if he's given him the next step up, if it's been a mesh or what, but, I've been really impressed with him, and I hope he wins. I won't be disappointed if anybody else besides Joey wins, which, again, I like Joey off the track. I can't stand him on the track.
He's the nicest guy you love to hate.
I know. I mean, he's got the smile and everything. Oh, that short track race, as Denny Hamlin did. But, I mean, it really is. Like, he puts a helmet on, and he goes from Marshall Mathers to Slim Shady. I don't know what it is. He's just a jerk on the track. But I'm excited for this Final Four. I think it might be nobody expected, maybe 2 of them.
Right.
And then the other 2 I think Chase was penciled in. Joey Logano, I think we all knew could get there. But the one that's run the worst is Chase Elliott.
Right.
He's only had 2 top 10 finishes the entire playoffs.
And as a matter of fact, he lost because he hasn't performed up to his standard. He actually lost the not the driver's points, but the owner's the car championship to Kyle Larson this past week, which I pretty much thought he had a lock on that going into the playoffs.
That's what it looked like. You had to perform as absolutely terrible as you possibly could to lose it. And that's what happens when you get 2 top 10s.
Right.
And what we've done now, 11 races or close to that for the playoffs. 9 races, and this will be the 10th. So, yeah, I think I would be more shocked if Chase Elliott won and beginning this playoffs. I thought it was a lock.
Yeah, and the only thing before we wrap it up, the only thing I could say, and the only thing that really scares me about Ross Chastain is will this be the race that Denny Hamlin finally says, "Remember me"?
If it is, I think Ross and one, and we talked about this off air. I think Denny Hamlin doesn't get to his hauler. Not just by Ross Chastain and company, maybe the fans.
Right.
He got absolutely annihilated by boos at his own home track. So I think now it just looks so petty, and it would have been celebrated if he didn't pull that move off last week.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So that's going to wrap it up for topic 1. If you have not seen the replay, do yourself a favor. It's over almost 10 million views on NASCAR, which is huge for NASCAR. And everybody's been talking about it. Ross Chastain pulls out the Hail Mary in NASCAR. We're going to come back and talk about things maybe slightly more depressing. We're going to head to the jungle. Thank you for tuning in. This is Talkin Sports here on Froggy 95.9 with Ryan and Joe. We'll be back after the break.
What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grilling Crew Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening in to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grilling Crew Sports Network is powered and brought to you by betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sportsbook that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Froggy Talkin Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name is Ryan Peters, joined by Joe Spillman, and now we're going to head possibly to the saddest place in the state of Ohio. That is the jungle. Obviously, Cleveland is rocking after the Monday night win where they absolutely throttled the Cincinnati Bengals. And, well, things have not been going well. It looked like things were turning around after beating a very not-so-great Saints team and what looked to be a god-awful Falcons team. The Cincinnati Bengals had the opportunity to go into Cleveland, a team that Zach Taylor has had a very hard time beating, and that's being very polite, and, really get a stranglehold on the season and the win column, play the hapless Carolina Panthers this week, and instead, the Bengals did on primetime what we're so accustomed to the Bengals doing, that is fall flat on their face, end up getting beat by 20 points, 20-plus points on Monday Night Football. Don't really stand a chance. Had lost in all four phases of the game. Didn't have 100 yards at halftime. Evan McPherson missed a field goal and an extra point. Kevin Huber can't punt his age. And the defense, who hasn't given up a touchdown the entire year in the second half, opened up the second half with 3 touchdowns. Now, that being said, if the Bengals end up winning this Sunday, and it'll be rough if they don't, against the Carolina Panthers, they will head into the bye week after 9 games at 5-4. Sam Hubbard said this is exactly where we were last year. But, Joe, do you feel as confident going into the bye last year as you do this year? If I saw this poll by Lance McAllister, at Lance McAllister, what level of DEFCON are you between 1 and 5, 1 being the worst? All systems go, the rockets are launching, head for cover, and 5 being there's a mild disturbance in the force.
I'd say I'm at DEFCON 2.5.
2.5, okay.
That
wasn't one of the options, but that's all right.
I'm between 1 and 2. How's that? And I disagree with the statement that I've seen a lot of people say on social media, including Sam Hubbard. We're in the same position we were last year. No, you're not, because look at your schedule after the bye week, right? You have Carolina this week, and then you go to your bye week, and then who do you have? The Titans, Chiefs, and Bills.
2 of those games on the road.
2 of those games on the road. You get to play the Chiefs at home. Yeah, you've beaten the Chiefs twice last year, but you know what? I do know that those are winnable games. Every game that they play is a winnable game. But we are looking at a team with where our expectations were at, that we thought as fans that we were going to see some next level play, and they've started this season and are playing like the same old Bengals. And one thing that really, really upsets me is the fact that there doesn't seem to be any urgency coming out of the Bengals camp. You watch Joe Burrow do his press conferences, you watch Zach Taylor, and it's oh, well, we got to get better. Or Zach Taylor, well, we lost that game before, we just didn't have enough time. It was out of control before we could do anything. Well, you know what? Maybe we should start having some urgency and start pressing the players and the coaches to have them understand that right now is now or never. You lose another game, you're not making the playoffs. You're very possibly not making the playoffs right now, because with the schedule that the Bengals play this year and what they have left on their schedule, they needed to win games early. They should be 5-2 or 6-1 right now, not sitting at 4-4, at 500. Playing one more game for the bye week and going into the bye week at 5-4. And I'm telling you right now, if they don't put something together and they don't bring the game and they go into the bye week at 4-5, the season is over. It's done. You're going to games now and you're rooting for a team that is not making the playoffs.
I think the thing that is most concerning to me is, number one, you have a head coach that outside of 1 year, outside of really one half of a season, hasn't really shown that he's capable of winning games. And on top of that, you've seen a team, and talking about the schedule, Joe, where Cincinnati has beat itself more often than the opponents beat them. Now you head to a part of the season in your schedule where your opponent can just straight beat you.
Right.
Even if you play a good game. So we have seen really one complete game, and even that one, the Atlanta Falcons game, had an absolute turd show to end the second quarter, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Where the out of nowhere, the Falcons, who were lifeless, just all of a sudden scored like 10 points or 11 points in the final, like, 48 seconds. I'm at DEFCON, I want to say 3. I would more than likely be at 2, just because there's a part of me, and I think this is actually a fault of mine. It's just apathy. I'm just to the point where I expect this stuff to happen anymore.
Yeah.
I literally, I went to sleep at like 2 a.m. after Monday night because I was frustrated. But I get more frustrated at myself for believing the page was turned. I don't equate this to the Bengals turning the page. It was me turning the page of confidence.
Right.
And I keep doing that to myself, saying, because I laid my standards at the beginning of the year, the first game we talked. And I said to you, the Steelers still find ways. I'm like, it's still them that finds a way to beat the Bengals. And sure enough, we came out the very beginning of the year and looked like we never played professional football in our entire lives. And that's just carried out through the entire season. And you're right. You talk to and you hear Zach Taylor, you hear Joe Burrow, oh, we're not panicking. We're not panicking. This is the NFL. You now just lost, in my mind, your most important player on defense in Chidobe Awuzie. I don't care how great Trey Hendrickson is. I don't care how great Sam Hubbard, Logan Wilson, used to be Jesse Bates. Chidobe Awuzie lines up against the greatest player on the other team, the most skilled player on the other team, and makes him have an off night. Do you remember Chidobe Awuzie getting torched at any game since he's put on stripes?
No, he's a good player.
He's good. Now, he might give up a play, but more often than not, it's not for a touchdown. They always go to the other side for the touchdown. Now, you put a guy in like Trey Flowers, immediately saw what the difference was in that.
Mm-hmm.
Completed pass on third down, then a touchdown. So you lose him for the year. You obviously do nothing at the deadline because it is still the Cincinnati Bengals and Mike Brown's still kicking. And there's not one single player, at least publicly, going, something's got to change.
Right.
Something's got to change. We are 0-3 in the division. Only one of those games were we competitive, and that was the Ravens game, where we lost on a last-second kick. Steelers game was not competitive for the most part, at least at the beginning. The Browns game was never competitive. That game was over as soon as we kicked the ball off. And you look at a team, and the defense can only get you so far because all we heard all year long is how great this offense will be. Number one, Lyle Collins is not as advertised. He's terrible.
He's terrible.
Jonah Williams, after picking up his fifth-year option, has been terrible. He's having the worst year of his career. Now, the Cordell Volson for a fourth-round rookie has been solid. Ted Karras and Alex Kappa, I think they've gotten their games together. They actually have been playing really well to where I think they're around top 5 in the league for what they're ranked. I don't think Volson is, but he's a fourth-round rookie, and he hasn't been a liability. He's been solid. On the biggest disappointment, and I think it's by far the biggest disappointment, is Joe Mixon.
Yep.
He does not look like the same caliber player, not only on the team, in the league.
Yeah.
He don't look like the best running back in the room.
No, he's not.
Chris Evans beats a linebacker on a sideline route, gains 26 yards. You want to know how many offensive snaps he played the rest of the game? 2. As many as you and me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No. I didn't realize that. That's incredible.
Samaje Perine on second and 7 gets a carry, gains 7 yards.
It was a good 7 yards. It was a hard running 7 yards.
Absolutely. He was mad that he got tripped up and
Right.
still got 7 yards. You know how many carries he got after that?
I don't think any.
One.
One more.
One more. And you're now, because of the Super Bowl and the criticism that Zach Taylor got by having Samaje Perine on the field, you're now seeing to where Joe Mixon is on the field on third downs. And I want to read you some stats, Joe. These are stats. These aren't me making things up out of thin air. The highest graded running back in pass protection the entire year is Samaje Perine by Pro Football Focus. He has an 88.7 grade and has not allowed a pressure the entire year when he's been in pass protection. Joe Mixon, however, has a grade of 24, which ranks 65th out of 67 backs and has allowed 3 sacks, the most in the NFL. Joe Mixon's elusive rating as a running back out of 54 running backs, you want to guess what it is?
It's probably 53 or 54.
It's 51st out of 54 qualified backs. His yards after contact.
You mean to tell me there's somebody easier to take down than Joe Mixon?
He is probably an undrafted rookie that was thrown in out of nowhere and maybe has one leg. His yards after contact, which is by far what I talked to you about.
He's got to be last in the league.
He's next to last. 2 yards last in the league. And here's where we're at, too.
I'm sure. I think I could probably arm tackle Joe Mixon.
You don't have to arm tackle. You have to breathe on him. You actually can stand social distance from Joe Mixon and he'll fall down. Joe Mixon is getting ready to go on his 6th season starting next year. He's going to be paid $10 million next year. He's paid $12 this year. Do you want to know what the most yards a running back has had in the last 5 years when in their 6th season?
Go ahead. I don't know.
Carlos Hyde at 1,053 yards, and they averaged 3.3 a carry, which would be an improvement this year if actually Joe Mixon got to that point. So there is something going on in the backfield to where this offense is defunct. And on top of it, you have a play caller in Zach Taylor who refuses, or Joe Burrow. There's a combination there where they refuse to run routes over the middle of the field and they refuse to throw the ball over the middle of the field. This team was heralded as one of the best offenses in football, and
they should be.
Monday night, you saw Joe Burrow without Jamar Chase, and Andy Dalton would have put up a more respectable game, at least trying to move the ball, than what we saw out of Joe Burrow.
Yeah, so and to talk about the offense and Joe Mixon in particular, and Zach Taylor's inadequate play calling is a whole nother discussion that we just don't have time for. I'll just say that the man is not an NFL play caller, hands down. I'm not even going to argue with anybody about that. It's proven. But I think what we're seeing with Joe Mixon right now is the historical tale of professional sports where they've paid this guy, and by God, he's going to play to the detriment of the team. Joe Mixon has no business on that football field anymore. He's either hurt or he can't run the ball anymore.
He's done.
Or he's done.
Yeah.
He dances so much. Running backs are supposed to hit the hole, and they're supposed to hit it. All you do when you dance, you tell youth football players this. You tell football players at every level that all you do by dancing is let the defense catch up to you. And that's all he's doing. And he can't break a tackle.
No, God.
He's not quicker than anybody in the defensive secondary anymore. He's not hitting the hole.
He doesn't get to the secondary.
He's playing terrible. And I hate to say that because I was a Joe Mixon fan. I have a Joe Mixon jersey. But you know what? You're done. You've already beat the average lifespan of an NFL running back at 3.5 years anyway.
Right.
You're done. It's time to call it quits. You are not contributing to the Cincinnati Bengals. And right now, maybe you're hamstringing Zach Taylor's atrocious play calling already because now he doesn't have a running game to supplement any passing game. But you go beyond that. The Cleveland Browns played a too-high safety all night, too-high safety zone all night long. That's all they played all night.
Which has been the scouting report this year.
Right. And that's all they play. And they have a terrible defense. Do you know how you beat a zone defense in the air? You throw to the middle of the field. How many times they throw to the middle of the field? Twice. All game.
Twice.
35
passes.
One of them was dropped, and Hurst caught the other one. And everything else is swing and wheel routes and out routes to the sideline. You don't beat a zone by trying to throw it over a zone. You throw to the holes in the zone, which is over the middle. And that's Zach Taylor.
That is.
Zach Taylor has no idea what he's doing. I'm sorry, I'm not an NFL coach, but I could call a better game than Zach Taylor. I'm telling you that right now. He's got to go. I mean, he's got to go as the play caller of the Cincinnati Bengals, because the Cincinnati Bengals will only be an average 500 team. I don't care who they have. You could put the 50 greatest players of the century on the Cincinnati Bengals in every position, and if Zach Taylor's calling the plays, they're going 500. That's just how it is. He's terrible.
He has shown nothing outside of last year when players were playing man, and that's because T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow hadn't earned that respect yet. It was, we're going to man you up, especially the Kansas City Chiefs, and we're make you beat us one-on-one, and they did. Well, the book's out. You only have to put 4 players on the defensive line. Don't have to stack the box because you got a running back who can't beat the box. 4 players, and you got an offensive line that's actually going to give up pressure with just 4 people running 4-on-5. So then too many Joes. I'm even sitting by one. Joe Burrow has to then dissect the offense or dissect the defense, and you do that easily. Like, Joe, when you play a zone team, you can dink and dunk your way down the field if that's what you want to do.
And you should be able to run on them.
Exactly right, because they're covering an area. They have a real estate that they have to be at. And if they aren't, then you really start beating them. I mean, you can even beat them like Tyler Boyd did last week by running a seam route out of the slot that we tried one time and it only went for 60 yards and a touchdown. But there's some unwillingness, and we saw Joe try to step up, and he took like 6 steps and had the football down by his hip. Is not what you're taught. That's like the only time you ever see him step up. He will not throw the ball away. It's like it takes an act of Congress for him to throw the ball away. And then when he does throw the ball, it's always to the side. And you saw the scouting report, Myles Garrett's like, I know I'm not going to get there, but I know what this pass is. It's going to go straight to my hands. And it ended up being an interception. And the Bengals, that was the most potent they looked in the entire game. And the one time they did throw the ball down the field, what happened? T. Higgins mossed somebody because he's that daggone good. I thought we were on the Grueling Truth only and almost said a bad word.
Oh, man.
But, I just think that you see this team, and I can't think of greater underperforming. I mean, even Andy Dalton with what he had and his limitations, we all think that Joe Burrow is a better quarterback than Andy Dalton. But Andy Dalton at least had somebody better calling the plays.
I'll take Jay Gruden back.
I was getting ready to say, Jay Gruden, obviously, he hated running the ball, but he still did.
I'll take him back right now.
It's just, Bob Bratkowski was more dynamic at some point. And, and it's just, you watch this team and it's being wasted. And what makes you more frustrated is not only are they not able to beat the team on the opposite side, but what I used to tell my JV baseball team, you can't beat yourself and expect to beat the other team.
No.
In Cincinnati's down 10-0 by their own play calling and their own mistakes of what they're trying to do to scheme against the NFL. And guess what? Even the worst team in the NFL wins football games and has really good players.
Well, and one thing I will say, I get really excited about the Bengals, obviously, and I'm going to. I spent a large amount of money down there on season tickets. So do you.
I wish they made us commit 6 months earlier this year.
Yeah, you commit because we know we're playing really bad. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. We got a lot of false hope last year as Bengals fan, and I kind of equate it to, it's like taking your 8-year-old out on Halloween and letting them get this big bucket of candy, and then when you get home, you get them one of the little mini Snickers bars and say, I'm taking the rest of it. That's exactly what the Bengals have done to me. I have been a lifelong Bengals fan, a passionate Bengals fan my entire life. My entire existence on earth, I can't remember a time that I wasn't passionately in love with the Bengals. And last year was the first year that I, as an adult, have been like, all right, we're finally doing this in Cincinnati. And I had expectations. My expectations this year were so high that I feel like I've been punched in the gut by the Cincinnati Bengals and their performance. But one last thing I'll say, and I know I get really passionate, But I mean when I say that as long as Zach Taylor's calling the plays in Cincinnati, they will be an average 500 team for the entirety of his career as a play caller.
Cincinnati had what was called a four-letter word, and that's hope. And that's something that they have not had in a long time to a city that's really suffered, its fans including. And guess what? It's all evaporated in a matter of 8 weeks. We're going to talk about one last thing. We appreciate you tuning in. This is Froggy Talkin Sports with Ryan and Joe. We'll be right back.
What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening in to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grueling Truth Sports Network is powered and brought to you by betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sports book that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Froggy Talkin Sports with Ryan and Joe. If you missed some of this show and you're like, hey, I want to listen to the first segment at the very least, or maybe some of the second segment after I tuned in halfway, make sure you check us out on Facebook. We have our own Facebook page at Froggy Talkin Sports on Froggy 95.9. And also this will re-air on The Grueling Truth. And you'll even get to see our mugs.
Yeah, and I will say, if you want to just hit the like and follow button on Facebook, on our Facebook page, you should get an alert every time we post a new video.
That's right. So make sure you do that. We appreciate that. And thank you again for tuning in. Those of you tuning in the old-fashioned way on your stereo, either driving or just chilling at the house. So we're going to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. Actually was my first ever sports love, and that's IU basketball. I am one of the Candy Stripes. They have given me a lot of anxiety and frustration. My dad, Jim Peters, a very, very passionate IU basketball fan. My entire room was IU basketball. The curtains, the border, everything. The bedspread, first thing I ever knew was going outside during halftime, whether it was 25 degrees or not, setting up a spotlight and pretending I was A.J. Guyton. So going into this season, IU has what I like to call expectations, high ones, nationally ranked ones, and that's something they haven't been at since the class of Jordy Halls, Christian Watford, Cody Zeller, Victor Oladipo, so it's been a little bit. IU is currently preseason ranked 13th, and right now predicted to win the Big Ten and also have a first-team All-American in Trace Jackson Davis preseason. And you got to say, as an IU fan, well, this is a good time. Have one of the best recruiting classes all year long with Jalen Hood-Schifano coming in and Malik Renault, CJ Gunn, and others. But Joe, as I'm prone to do as a very pessimistic person, I'm going to tell you that as excited as you should be, more importantly, like we talked about the Cincinnati Bengals, I have a prove-it-to-me mentality. I do not buy hype. Now, I may set hype internally, but I do not buy external hype. And what IU, especially their social media programs, are really good at is setting hype. They like to show you how much they've been working in the offseason. They like to show you how many threes they can make during practice. But what the Cincinnati Bengals have at least done is make it to a national championship game within the last 2 decades. It's been 20 years since IU went there, and they end up losing to Maryland in 2002. But IU really has done nothing to earn the praise that they have been given. Actually, their previous year, they had to get into the final or the first 4 to even make it to the dance, which includes 68 teams. And I know a lot of you at home don't want to be poo-pooed right before the season starts, but I ask you to do this. Do not go into this season with high expectations, because expectations and things of that nature, respect have to be earned. And right now, there has been no respect earned in the Big Ten based upon IU's play. They have played at the very middle, if not worse, in the Big Ten, which is a great conference. But, Joe, you mentioned to me off air that IU brings back 9 players. That's normally a good thing.
Yeah, 9 or 10, yeah.
Those 9 players have accomplished what?
They made it to the first 4 of the
You're right.
NCAA playoffs last year.
They did. And then they played St. Mary's, a mid-major. That's not the best in this division. Granted, that's Gonzaga. And do you remember how that game went?
Yeah, they lost.
No, they got thumped.
Yeah, well,
They didn't lose. They got thumped. That same group of kids now comes back and all of a sudden are allotted the number 1 spot in the Big Ten. If it was you, and again, you follow IU basketball, your wife's an alumnus.
right.
From that perspective, going in as somebody who doesn't follow it passionately like I do, where do you sit with IU basketball? Do you disagree with what I've said, or as someone that has a little less emotion tied to it, how do you view IU basketball from afar?
So, my fandom of IU basketball came with my wife in our marriage, with her being an alumnus. So I'm actually a new. I would call myself a casual fan of IU over the last 9 years. So, really, I'm a UC fan. I'm still stuck in the Bob Huggins era at UC, and
That was a good era.
yeah, I'm still wishing for the Kenyon Martin return, but they have fell off here in the last couple of years at UC, and so I've started watching IU a little bit more, and I really got into watching it last season because I saw a team that I thought that could be really good. I don't know that on the court. I saw a lot of things on the court that I think maybe from a coaching perspective or being a fan of basketball probably could have went different. And I saw a lot of potential out of that team, and it just looked like they weren't performing. They didn't look like a cohesive group out on that court to me, objectively looking at this team. And I will say that I think that they have a lot of talent on the IU basketball team. I think they put a lot of talent out on the court, and I think really their success is going to be either handicapped by their mental status out on the court or the guy sitting at the end of the bench coordinating what they're doing on the court. So,
You mean the almost 70-year-old man that's now in his second season ever coaching basketball?
right? And he's a former IU player, and I think that obviously he knows basketball. I think he should be a good coach, but there was some things last year that I questioned, and but his level of play and what he's done with his coaching career is a lot more than I could ever say that I've done. So I'm really not the right person to sit here and kind of question what I see. I will say, just like any fan, I think that your pessimism toward IU is because of what you've seen and what you saw last year. And
not just last year.
Or the last couple of years. And we kind of said this off air is they're basically an average college basketball team, or what we saw last year, maybe slightly below average, that has the potential to win big games. And that's really why I believe that they were in the first 4 last year, is because you can't put a team that has the potential to beat the 3rd or 4th team in the nation, because they did have that potential. They could do that. You can't put them in as a 15th or 16th seed and let them upset somebody. The NCAA is not going to do that. So unfortunately, for IU to be safe and getting into the tournament with a decent seed, they have to perform all year.
Right.
Because they can't be a mediocre team and expect to get in, because college basketball is going to say, no, you're too dangerous to put you in as a high seed.
Well, a player like Geo Baker, who, if you remember him as an IU fan, it wouldn't be very hard. It's a guy that would come into Assembly Hall and light them up and lead a team like Rutgers, the Scarlet Knights. He won. Rutgers has won 7 of the last 8 games against IU. And you're going to tell me that IU is now predicted to win the Big Ten? Based on what? Because they returned guys that couldn't beat Rutgers? In this sport, I hate preseason rankings, especially when they're given to you without being earned. IU's earned nothing. Absolutely nothing. Mike Woodson's earned nothing. He's a failed NBA coach who's had a hard time landing a job. Every time he gets one, he gets canned. Then comes into the Big Ten, and I will say this about Mike Woodson that I like. He has restored the passion for what IU basketball was. He's positively talked about Bob Knight, which actually seems like you have to go on a limb at IU basketball for the last 20 years to actually do that and, recognize what he's done. But IU has earned nothing. And I caution you because, again, we just talked about the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that for one season earned something. And guess where they're at right now?
Yeah.
They look mediocre again.
Yep.
IU has not done anything to not look mediocre. They've been mediocre. What's amazing to me is IU basketball. We have the slogan, at least the Pacers have used this at times too. In 49 states, it's just basketball, but this is Indiana. When you think about Indiana basketball as a high school, Joe, what comes to mind? What type of product do you typically see on the floor?
Just here locally, or you mean everywhere in Indiana?
Everywhere in Indiana. If you said a high school basketball player is able to do what because he plays in the state of Indiana, what would that be? What skill would he have?
All of them, typically. I mean, you see really good ball handling in Indiana, which you don't see at other places. You see really good fundamental basketball, rebounding.
Fundamental basketball,
right.
That's a key word,
right.
Yes.
You see good fundamental basketball. You see kids boxing out. You see kids doing the small things when you watch Indiana basketball that when you go to, say, not saying it doesn't take place at schools like Ohio, but Ohio's a football state, right?
Yeah.
You go up there, you watch typical basketball games. I went to a much larger school than we have here locally with Switzerland County, and I could tell you that our football team would have beat the smithereens out of the Switzerland County football team. Just hands down, wouldn't even have been a contest. Right. You're talking 70-0. But our basketball team would have had a hard time competing with them, and that's what you get in Indiana.
Here's what I think about when I think of Indiana. Number one, you mentioned fundamentals, which I tie into basketball IQ. Indiana, I almost said Switzerland County after you talked about them. Indiana has not had high basketball IQ. For a state that produces the type of talent that this state does, and the Candy Stripe kids have not had a lot of basketball IQ, whether that be shot selection. Thankfully, the defense has increased, which Mike Woodson has done that. He's made Indiana a defensive team. But when I think about at any given time watching an Indiana high school basketball game, it just seems like there's always been shooters. Now, you may go to another state and see athletes, which I think, like Ohio you're talking about. You've got some athletic kids playing sports in Ohio from a basketball standpoint. But it seems like no matter what, Joe, when we watch high school games and we call them on Froggy 5.9, there's at least one kid that's a knockdown deadbolt shooter. If not, everybody has that allotment or ability to do so. IU basketball has not been able to find a freaking shooter since Nick Zeisloff, who had to transfer from Illinois State. You cannot tell me this state has not produced shooters.
Well, maybe that's their problem. Do you know off the top of your head, because I don't, how many players are on the IU roster from Indiana?
That's getting better. I would say right now, and this would be a guess, CJ Gunn is. Anthony Leal, who gets no playing time, is. Trace Jackson Davis is. And that might be where it is. There's probably players further down the roster, but off the top of my head, those are the three that I can name. And one of those gets tremendous playing time, and he's 6'9".
Well, and so, I'll caveat that, and something that I do know a little bit about. If you go back to the early and mid 80s, when IU was winning national championships and NITs and were great year in and year out, how many Indiana?
They didn't leave.
Yeah.
It was
the entire roster was made up of Indiana kids.
Now you know where those kids do go that are Indiana kids that can shoot. They go up north. They go to Purdue and West Lafayette. Purdue has never had not had an abundance of shooters. You think of Sasha Stefanovic and others that have gone to Purdue and been able to shoot the ball, but they just simply don't go to IU. It just seems like we as in the Hoosier Nation have just had such a horrible time after having kids in the backyard in Bloomington South, like a Jordy Halls, like a Victor Oladipo who turned into a shooter, Christian Watford who was 6'8" who could shoot the ball. It's just not been there ever since, and it just amazes me, and that's why I caution you, because now you bring back 9 guys who've won nothing, and then you have a recruiting class, and Joe, you're going to put your eggs in your basket on 18-year-old kids?
No.
No, I'm not.
No, and you could kind of equate that to, the NFL draft. Kids coming out of high school into Division I college basketball, you don't know what they're going to do. It doesn't matter what they did in high school. It matters. I mean, it got them to the point where they're being offered to come out there, but you don't know how they're going to perform in a different environment. Kids, 18-year-old kids lose their mind when they get away from mommy and daddy. They lose their mind when they're put in an environment where they're in charge of their own responsibility somewhat, and they're in charge of their own success. And you've seen how many millions, and I'll say millions of great athletes in this country throughout, the last century have come out of college, and people thought that they were the next gift to any given sport, and they spend 2 or 3 years in college and they're back home.
Yeah.
It happens every year, all the time, in every community.
I mean, even most recently, we thought the greatest player in high school, he was chasing Damon Bailey in this state, was Romeo Langford. Romeo Langford stepped into IU, and he was a solid player. I was ready to put him as one of the best. There was people waiting outside of high schools for hours to try to get his autograph because of what he did as a high school athlete. And he steps foot into IU, can't shoot, has a hand injury. I heard, it's a hand injury. What's he done in the pros?
Nothing.
He's already been traded. He actually was talked about being cut. And it's just that type of athlete that Indiana, even though under the Knight era, they never had great individual players. They had really good ones, at least from a professional perspective. But you couldn't find 5 harder guys playing on a floor at any given time.
You know what? And I think next week we're going to have one of those hard guys, those guys that played really hard.
An Indiana Basketball Hall of Famer.
An Indiana Basketball Hall of Famer. So I think we could probably let the cat out of the bag. Next week on this show, we will have a member of the 1981 National Championship team, an Indiana Basketball Hall of Famer, Steve Risley, come on and talk some IU basketball with us.
Yeah, our good friend. And, he probably will be a lot more optimistic than I am. And thankfully, Steve will actually have a few games to talk about, and we can dissect that. And maybe his passion will lead to more promise. This is a guy that knows Mike Woodson.
Yeah, personally.
He's played with Mike Woodson. So, he can tell you more than just this guy that, is viewing it from his television. Steve walked the walk and lived the life of an IU basketball player with the general. But I just say this. Don't ever, ever, ever in sports, because you're doomed to get hurt, you're doomed to be disappointed. Let somebody be given something, credit, a ranking, without it being earned.
Yeah, you got to earn it in sports. You got to earn it in life.
Exactly right.
So.
A guy that walks in